Phil Knight, the man behind Nike, didn't begin his journey with wealth, fame, or certainty about the future. He began it with a crazy idea, a pair of running shoes, and a dream that most people laughed at. His story is not just about business. It is about vision, risk, and the unshakable belief that one person's passion can change the way the whole world moves. Born in 1938 in Portland, Oregon, Phil grew up in a modest household, the son of a publisher. He wasn't born with silver spoons or golden connections. What he had instead was an obsession with running and a curiosity that made him see the world differently. Running gave him discipline, and curiosity gave him direction. As a young athlete, he noticed that American shoes lacked quality and innovation compared to the ones being made in Japan. That observation became the seed of Nike, a brand that would eventually become a global empire, recognized not just for shoes but as a symbol of greatness, ambition, and possibility. Phil Knight's journey was not smooth. After college, he traveled the world, searching for purpose. He wrote a paper during his MBA at Stanford that planted the seed. Why couldn't Japanese shoes, high in quality yet low in cost, compete with the German giants like Adidas and Puma? With that thought, he boarded a plane to Japan, not as a wealthy entrepreneur but as a young man with courage, carrying nothing more than belief in his own vision. There, he convinced Onitsuka, a Japanese shoe company, to give him the rights to sell their Tiger shoes in the United States. He didn't even have a company yet, but he pretended he did. He called it Blue Ribbon Sports, a name that sounded official enough to hide the fact that he was working out of the trunk of his car. Imagine this scene, a young Phil Knight, standing by a car after track meets, pulling shoes out of the back seat, convincing athletes to try them on, speaking with passion, and selling not just shoes but a dream. People laughed at him. They doubted him. But slowly, one shoe at a time, his dream began to take shape. With the help of his former track coach, Bill Bowerman, who was obsessed with creating lighter, faster shoes, Phil Knight built a foundation of trust among athletes. Bowerman even experimented by pouring rubber onto a waffle iron to create better soles. That innovation would later become the iconic Nike Waffle Trainer, a breakthrough that revolutionized running shoes forever. But Phil's journey was not just about clever ideas. It was about perseverance through rejection, debt, lawsuits, and doubt. In the early years, Blue Ribbon Sports barely made enough to survive. Banks refused to give him loans. Friends doubted his decisions. Competitors tried to crush him. There were nights when he wondered if it was all over, but each time, he came back stronger. He believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in creating not just a product, but a symbol, a swoosh that would one day represent victory, speed, and the spirit of competition. The name Nike came later, inspired by the Greek goddess of victory, and the iconic swoosh logo was designed by a student for just $35. At the time, Phil Knight didn't even like it that much. But history had other plans. That swoosh would go on to become one of the most recognized symbols on Earth, representing athletes, champions, and dreamers everywhere. And Phil Knight, once the man selling shoes out of his car, would become the billionaire co-founder of Nike, one of the most powerful brands in history. But perhaps the most inspiring part of Phil Knight's story isn't just the billions he earned or the empire he built. It's the fact that he never forgot the struggle. He never forgot the late nights, the empty bank accounts, the fear of failure, or the feeling of being laughed at. He turned rejection into motivation. He turned setbacks into stepping stones. And in his book Shoe Dog, he admitted that even at the height of his success, he still felt like the same runner chasing after something greater, something just out of reach. That hunger is what defined him, and that hunger is the lesson for anyone listening today. Phil Knight's life teaches us that you don't need to be born rich to build something extraordinary. You don't need to have all the answers to start. What you need is a dream so strong that you're willing to risk everything for it. You need persistence when no one believes in you. And you need the courage to take the first step, even if it means selling shoes out of the trunk of your car. That is how legends are made. That is how ordinary men become extraordinary. As Phil Knight continued to sell Onitsuka Tiger shoes through Blue Ribbon Sports, his life was far from glamorous. Many people see billionaires and imagine smooth roads, luxury offices, and immediate success. But in the early years, Phil lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly reinvesting every dollar back into his dream. He worked as an accountant by day and built his shoe company at night, sacrificing weekends, social life, and sometimes even sleep. The company was small, but Phil's belief was enormous. Every box of shoes he sold wasn't just a transaction. It was proof that his dream was alive. But dreams always attract challenges. Onitsuka, the Japanese company he partnered with, wasn't loyal forever. As Blue Ribbon Sports grew, Onitsuka tried to cut Phil out and give distribution rights to someone else. Imagine the heartbreak. Years of effort, building trust, selling shoes by hand, only to have the rug pulled out from under you. Most people would have quit right there. But not Phil Knight. Instead of giving up, he turned betrayal into fuel. He decided that if his partnership with Onitsuka ended, he would build his own brand. This was the turning point. This was the birth of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. In 1971, Blue Ribbon Sports officially transformed into Nike. The name, suggested by a colleague, came from the Greek goddess of victory. And that cheap $35 swoosh logo, designed by Carolyn Davidson, suddenly took on a life of its own. At first, Phil Knight wasn't sure if it worked. But history has a way of proving visionaries right. That swoosh would one day be on the shoes of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Serena Williams, Cristiano Ronaldo, and countless champions across the globe. It would be worn by ordinary kids chasing their first dream and world-class athletes breaking impossible records. The swoosh became more than a design. It became a movement. But Nike's beginning was far from easy. The company was in debt constantly, taking every risk imaginable to grow. Banks refused to give loans, investors doubted the business, and competitors like Adidas and Puma dominated the market. Phil Knight and his small team worked relentlessly, pouring their energy into creating shoes that actually helped athletes perform better. This was not about style first. It was about function, about giving runners lighter shoes, better grip, and faster times. Coach Bowerman's waffle iron experiment became legendary, and Nike shoes slowly started standing out. Athletes noticed. Coaches noticed. And soon, the world would notice. The 1970s became a decade of struggle and survival, but also of breakthrough. Nike shoes were gaining attention in track and field, and the company's innovative designs began winning trust among professional athletes. What made Phil Knight special was that he wasn't just selling shoes, he was selling belief. He was an athlete himself, and he knew what it felt like to chase improvement. Nike wasn't just a business to him, it was a calling, a mission to inspire every runner, every athlete, every dreamer to go further, to push harder, to just do it, even before that iconic slogan was born. By the time Nike was incorporated and began selling its own shoes, Phil Knight and his team were working non-stop to market them. They didn't have big budgets for advertising, so they relied on authenticity. They put shoes directly in the hands of athletes. They listened to feedback. They improved designs over and over again. That persistence paid off when Nike gained traction among runners across America. And then came the real turning point, the 1972 Munich Olympics. Nike's presence on the global stage started small, but it planted the seed that Nike was not just another shoe company, it was a rising force. Still, success came with sacrifices. Phil Knight poured everything into Nike, sometimes risking his own stability and well-being. He lived with stress that most people couldn't handle. Lawsuits with Onitsuka, constant battles with banks, and the fear of collapse haunted him. But every time the world pushed him down, he came back stronger. His mindset was simple. Keep running, keep pushing, keep going forward, no matter what. That was the runner's spirit in him, and it became the foundation of Nike's culture. Phil Knight's story also highlights the importance of a team. He wasn't alone. He had Bowerman's relentless innovation, Carolyn Davidson's swoosh design, and a group of loyal employees who believed in the mission even when paychecks were late. They weren't working for money. They were working for a cause, for a belief that they were building something bigger than themselves. That unity became one of Nike's greatest strengths. As the company grew, Phil Knight began to realize that Nike wasn't just about shoes anymore. It was about identity. When someone wore Nike, they weren't just wearing sneakers. They were wearing confidence, determination, and ambition. Nike became the uniform of dreamers and doers. That brand philosophy was powerful. and it helped Nike grow from a struggling startup into a movement that captured hearts. Phil Knight himself remained humble through much of this rise. He wasn't the loud, flashy type of entrepreneur. He was reserved, almost shy, preferring to let the shoes and the athletes tell the story. But behind the scenes, he was a fierce competitor, someone who refused to let obstacles win. That combination, humble on the outside, relentless on the inside, made him one of the most unique business leaders of all time. And so, the man who once sold shoes out of a car was now building a company that would soon challenge the giants of the sportswear industry. Nike was not yet the global empire we know today, but the foundation was set. The battles were far from over, but Phil Knight had already proven one thing. Dreams are built step by step, mile by mile, with persistence and passion. His journey was just beginning, and the world was about to witness the rise of one of the greatest brands in history.